Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach Replay Show. I'm your host today, Cory Camp. And I'm excited to have an old friend on. It's been a while since we've had a chance to chat together, but I'm really excited about the topic that she's kicking off for us for this month, Dr. Estella Chizhik. She can tell you the Russian pronunciation, maybe, of her last name. We were talking about that just a minute ago. But she comes to us from San Diego State University in California. She's the Liberal Studies Coordinator and has a lot of impact in teacher education, specifically elementary studies, and some of the different things that have been going on in California. And I'm just excited to have you on to talk today with us. So welcome, Stella.
Thank you, Cory. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Are you going to give us the Russian pronunciation of your last name?
I wish I could, but I can't. My children can, my husband can, but I can't. And apparently it's a sound that is not familiar in the English language. And it's the ZH in the Chizhik, and apparently they can say it. I can't. So it comes out Chizhik.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of things here in Ohio that this Texan can't apparently say correctly. So I get it. Well, wonderful. So tell everyone a little bit more about what you do. Things have changed recently in California, which was news to me. I didn't realize in California previously, universities weren't able to provide those teacher credentials like we see in a lot of other states, but now that's changed. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So California has always been granting teacher credentials, but they decided, so I won't say because I could be wrong, but many decades ago, that they wanted to have a fifth-year teacher credential program.
Right.
That they wanted it separate from the undergraduate program because they felt like teachers or future teachers needed to first learn subject matter competency, and they would do that during their undergraduate program. And then after that, then they apply to a credential program where they learn pedagogical competency. So they kept those separate, and that was sort of the mandate. But over time, they were providing opportunities for some universities to offer undergraduate teaching credentials. But with the teaching shortage that, became evident about 10 years ago, they really boosted that opportunity for any Cal State University to offer a teacher credential program, which is called the Integrated Teacher Education Program, ITEP for short. And essentially, the subject matter competency and the pedagogical competency are integrated into the undergraduate program. So as Liberal Studies Coordinator at San Diego State University, I get to sort of oversee the integrated teacher education programs. And we have 4 of them. We have a bilingual ITEP program, 2 special education, one focused on mild moderate, and the other one on extensive needs support credential. And then, of course, we have a general education for elementary. But we also have for single subjects, which is not under liberal studies, but we also have some for math and chemistry and social science. So it's a really exciting time. And I think one of the reasons why California is doing this is because, like I said, they want to ensure that more people are going into teaching, and they want to do that by removing the barriers. So because paying for 4 years and then an additional 5th year is expensive and it takes time. And a lot of people can't afford to do the 5th year because that requires doing, full-time student teaching. So that means you can't really work. So it's really a challenge for a lot of people to do that program. So having it integrated in the undergraduate program really allows students to hopefully not have that extra expense, but also it allows students to get it done faster. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited that California has provided that. And it leads me to what I want to talk about, and that is the idea of hopefully encouraging more teachers of color with this particular pathway. Because like I said, removing the barriers is one of the things that the state of California is trying to do, and making it less expensive, faster for people to do it, hopefully will encourage more teachers or people of color going into teaching, which is something that we terribly need.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when we look at, I mean, just this year alone, looking at the economy and how we're all kind of reevaluating the cost of everything. My chickens are need to start paying rent again, and giving us eggs, even though it's the winter time, right? Eggs are expensive. Everything's expensive. The thought of, you know, having to take off an entire year to do field study, and then on top of paying for that experience, definitely your program can provide a lot. I mean, that's a huge barrier. I think that some people just can't imagine overcoming. So that's amazing.
Oh, and not to mention the gas. This past year was, you know,
oh yeah, traveling, right?
So getting to the school site and back, and to the university.
Yeah.
In California, gas prices got as high as $6 a gallon. So many of our students were like, please, you know, please, can I just work at the school down
right next to me? Yeah.
So yeah, it was a real tremendous challenge for many students. So I really appreciate what California and any state that's trying to remove the barriers so that more people can go into teaching, and especially more people of color. Like I said, it's very important, and I'm appreciative when that happens.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, because of course we know that we need more teachers, not only coming into the field, but then really thinking about how we keep those teachers in the field, you know. So just in general, we need to kind of further strengthen the field, our workforce, all of our teachers and educators. But as we think about the importance of having people of color and thinking about other, you know, demographics of teachers, talk to me a little bit about why that is so important in education today.
Well, first, just look at the numbers. The numbers tell us that we need more teachers of color. Nationally, most teachers are white, female, and middle class. And in states like California, where our student demographics are primarily students of color, we have over 60% of our students are students of color. Having majority white female teachers is wonderful. I mean, it's great that they are well trained, but it's nice to have teachers that look like the students in the classroom. And there's increasing evidence from research that is very powerful. Having and I should know the research names, and I apologize, but I will tell you, just generally speaking, that some of the research that I've read is that when a child has a teacher of color, especially a Black teacher, a Black student has a Black teacher, they are more likely to graduate from high school and less and more likely to go on to college. So just having one Black teacher at some point, especially in the early elementary grades, that's a very powerful impact. We also are seeing it in terms of STEM fields, having more representation in math classrooms and science classrooms can really bolster the number of students who take advanced math classes and also go on to college. So this is a really important area that I think if we want to address some of the inequities that we see in our society, we need to start thinking about who are the teachers that are teaching our students, especially our underrepresented students in the classroom. So trying to find ways to recruit teachers of color is an important thing. In California, if I can just brag a little bit about an activity, an opportunity that I get to participate in. San Diego Unified School District, which is like the second largest school district in the state of California, has made a strong commitment to recruit more teachers of color. And they've created an organization called Teach Lead. And I can provide that resource after we're done here. But Teach Lead is creating that pathway, essentially, from high school to college into teaching, and then also maintaining that workforce in the classroom. And so they have partnered with many universities in the area, and in particular, San Diego State University. And they are working with a student organization, which I had the privilege of help start, called Future Teachers of Color. So Teach Lead and Future Teachers of Color at San Diego State University are providing those opportunities for teacher candidates of color to learn about how to apply at San Diego Unified School District, what is needed in terms of application. They need videos, which we use Sibme at San Diego State. So that's a really nice thing that they do. So they need videos for their application. They go through an interview. So they teach them all of that, how they can go through that process so that they can be hired. And through this Teach Lead process, when a student applies through that, they monitor them. So they want to see, are they being considered by principals? Are principals interviewing them? And if not, what's happening? If they are not getting hired, what's happening? So it's a really nice pipeline that they have created to monitor, to see who are the teachers of or teacher candidates of color that are going through. And if they're not making it into the system, what might be the reasons for it? So yeah, so one of the things that we do at San Diego State to support them is we provide our teacher candidates awareness of these Teach Lead opportunities. We have workshops for them. We organize them sometimes virtually and sometimes in person, although we have greater success virtually because a lot of our candidates work all over the San Diego region, which can be as far south as the border and as far north as North County, which may not mean anything to your audience, but it's a wide area, and East County. So having it virtually is really a good way to reach a lot of people.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. So you mentioned some research, you mentioned more information about Teach Lead. I just want to remind our audience that you'll have access to all of that in our notes and takeaways, which you can download from today's episode. So we'll definitely have that there. I mean, you brought to light some research that I didn't necessarily know, like the idea that if in my early education experience, if I'm a child of color, I have a teacher of color, that increases my likelihood to graduate, just that alone, right?
Right.
And then like involvement in STEM, which we're trying to get all of our students into. Right. That idea of representation, and that an individual, a student, a child can identify with an adult in their building, I think that's powerful. We're seeing that all over the world in many different fields. Like we're seeing, the representation huge in, the movie and media fields as well. But I think that's really powerful as we think about our future teachers and our future leaders, that they are also seeing themselves in the leaders in their building at the school during the day.
Right.
So I think that's powerful. And that was not something that I necessarily knew about. So I'm really interested in that research. And then
may I speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the reasons why it is powerful is because teachers of color are come in with a strong equity mindset. So, and I think this is something, that mindset is something that all teachers can have and should have, right? So this idea of where, of fairness in terms of discipline in the classroom, of thinking twice about, you know, who and how to support students when they are misbehaving. So they tend to have more of that equity mindset. But the other thing is that they have a better way of communicating with families. And maybe it's because of that familiarity, that in terms of culture, because of who they are, that they can communicate with families, which also leads to helping to support the student. So those are just two ways in which we can see that representation really supports students, especially students of color. And I had another idea that I wanted to share, but it just flew out of my mind. So
that happens to me, right? So maybe you'll think of it as we're talking. I want to just kind of summarize a little bit what I heard you talk about with Teach Lead, which sounds like an amazing organization that they've kind of put to. I love how you kind of called it this pipeline, right? Where they're not only recruiting and creating a very, it looks like they're just removing barriers all the way up to that pathway of just kind of getting accepted into undergrad for education studies, but then also thinking about post-graduation certification, thinking about how they are then going into the workforce and what's getting in the way, which I think is something that's really valuable for us to look at, right? Like, where are the holes in our system that keep us, even when we have people there, keep us from hiring them? And then how do we maintain them? How do we retain those teachers? So what I heard you talk about with your students is that you kind of, it's about raising awareness and then engaging them and thinking about, again, engaging them in ways that removes barriers, so that virtual provides more accessibility for them to get the word and engage with those workshops that you have. So I think that's powerful. And I'm sure there are other states that have similar programs. So if you are an audience member and you know of something similar in your state, I would love if you would drop a comment and let us know, just in case somebody's looking for how they might get involved with such a project, or if they're looking to have, they've got, you know, people of color that they are looking at getting into the workforce as well. So I think that's great. So when it comes to, what are some things that, you know, maybe from Teach Lead and in your work at San Diego State University that you are seeing, besides kind of minimizing the barriers as much as possible? Are there specific things that we can think about if we are, whether we are at a university, we're working with teacher candidates, or we're working with new teachers who are in their first few years? What's going to support then the learning and the continued growth of our teachers of color? Is there anything specific that we need to be mindful of or make a change, not just for them, but for everybody, that's kind of the right direction?
Right. So clearly, part of it is recruiting, and I think that's important, but it is only one part of the picture, and the other is training. So all teachers need to be well trained regarding equity issues, more positive ways to handle discipline, creating a positive classroom learning environment for their students, how to support students in all of their different ways of being, I like to call it. So no matter whether their racial identity, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, just recognizing all of that is really important. I think about what has happened in Memphis with the police officers, and I want to take a moment to talk about that, because we have 5 Black police officers, which is great in terms of representation, but clearly the way that they handled the situation was not appropriate. So representation is good, but good training, equity-minded training is essential for all people. And in terms of teaching, one of the things that I really appreciate is the opportunity to use video coaching to support teachers in understanding what is happening in the classroom. Who is participating, who is not participating. You can see that in a video. I have a really powerful experience where I was working with the student teacher, and they recorded their lesson. And during that lesson, there were 2 students that were acting up, as kids do. This is elementary, so it must have been a 2nd grade classroom, and 2 boys acting up, 1 white and 1 Black. And the teacher was reading, doing a read aloud, sitting in the chair reading. And so while she was reading, she heard something. She knew she heard something, and she knew that there were the 2 students who were clearly misbehaving. But what was shocking to me was that she called out one of those students. And one of those students that was called out was the Black student, when both of them were clearly misbehaving. That was a very important discussion to have with the student, to say, this happened. Do you see this happening? What, how do how does that change the way you do your discipline? What kinds of things that you need to think about when you are in the situation and you're seeing, kind of behaviors taking place? How can you stop yourself from just going with the quick response and discipline one or both? So those are the kind of conversations that I think need to happen. And it's great that it happens, or that it can happen when we use video to capture those nuances that are not always available when we're just, going through. There's a lot of things as teachers that we think about, right?
Right.
An enormous amount, and we can't remember everything, and we can't justify everything. But a video allows us to capture that, and I think it's a really powerful source.
Yeah, and look at it objectively. When we think about, equity in instruction and how we manage our classroom and support our students, again, a lot of the inequities aren't intentional, right? They're very systematic, and they're just they are unchecked biases, right? They're unconscious. And so, imagining having that conversation with the teacher, if you were in there, not recording, and saying, I noticed this happen, right? There could be a number of things that recall might come to justify that, and not really focusing on the fact that that happened and the ramifications of that. So video is a really powerful tool just to help us pause and objectively look at a situation, and then think about all of the pieces that kind of help, the mindsets, the different things, even body language, being able to look at that and see how that has an effect on our students and their learning experience and our relationships with them. So I love that is another element that you all are using video for in your coaching, is not just, do we see strong pedagogical practices and here's this strategy, but then also breaking it down to a little bit deeper level and thinking about those equitable experiences.
Right. Because one of the things that I think is really important for all teachers to be thinking about is who's engaged and why are they engaged. And I know that when I teach, I seem to favor those students who seem to be engaged, look like they're enthusiastic, raising their hands, commenting, but there could be 3, 5, 10 students that are not, that I am not, even aware of or thinking of in the moment of teaching. And so I think to your point, video is a very powerful tool to help us examine or become aware of our unconscious bias. So I think when we go into teaching, all of us believe that we care for students, all of our students. But with video, you can see to what extent that is the case or where we fall short.
Mm-hmm.
Not to make us feel, I don't think that it's what I want are for students to feel bad or guilty, but I think it's important to be aware and then to try to find ways in which to address those shortcomings. And I think that's the role that video plays generally in terms of pedagogy. If we are not doing something, or if we can do something better, then that's great. But also in terms of how we interact with students. So I think that's a really powerful tool. And I want to give a big shout out to one of my colleagues, Daniel Reinholtz, who is in math education, who really, that's his work to look at how teachers are aware of who is engaged and who is not, and recognizing that we tend to favor students who maybe are not students of color, or who are, we tend to favor students who are not students of color in the classroom. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of some research around like explicit instruction and Nita Archer's work that I learned of many years ago, but when she talked about just the practice of cold calling on students and who do we usually call on? We're either calling on the student who appears completely checked out and doesn't seem to have it, or we're calling on the student who's going to confirm our answer, and or even thinking about who raises their hands and the demographics of those students. And they aren't typically our students of color. So yeah, I think there are so many points here as we think about just equity in general, for our youngest students to our oldest students who are in, their undergraduate and looking to moving into the field of education. So many good points. Again, thinking about awareness, recruiting, training, and not just training that focuses on the science of teaching, but really that art piece of teaching and interacting with folks. So,
and when you mean art, you mean the heart of it.
So heart of it. Oh, I love that.
How do we interact with our students and support them and engage them?
Oh, I love that. The heart of teaching. Yes. So I know we could go on forever, but I know we're kind of out of time today for our recording. So I want to remind everyone that they can find out how to get in touch with you if they've got more questions. She's fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. So she's got so many amazing ideas and important work that she's been a part of. So definitely reach out to Dr. Chizhik if you've got more questions for her about the work that she's talked about. We'll also be linking to those research studies and some of these resources that she's discussed today. So yeah, anything else as we think about recruiting more people of color into our field, keeping them in our field? I love that you talked about it's more than just representation, but it's about those equitable practices. Anything else for our listeners today?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about this issue. This is something that's really important to me. I really am working very hard to increase the number of teachers of color in the San Diego area. And so, anytime that I get a chance to talk about it, it's just a real joy.
Yeah, well, we are so proud of the work that y'all are doing. And that we get to be a part of it, Sibme especially, but it's great to have you on. So I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions, might get a chance to have you back on. I know you're busy. So thanks so much for joining us today. And folks, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. But thanks so much again, Stella, for joining me today.
Thank you, Cory.
Bye, everyone.